All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. I have quite a special interview for you today. Laurie and I have been connecting about this interview for it seems like a really long time, and we're finally here. And I'm so thankful that you're here, Laurie. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
My joy.
Thank you. And I want you all to notice the painting behind her. I'll be quiet for a moment. Laurie, say something so the camera stays on you, and then I will.
This painting was created by 12 women and myself who are working to learn a methodology called the Singing Tree Collaborative Mural Methodology that envisions solutions and heals heartbreaks. And this is called the Rowan Singing Tree to Embrace Our Unknown. That's where we are.
Perfect is that? I can't even, when you told me the title, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, that is perfect. That is exactly where we are. Yes. Oh,
and
thank you for that.
That's the genius of collaboration.
Yeah.
It's the time for the lone wolf never was, and it's really over now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, you are so correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Let me read Laurie's bio so that we can get that piece locked in, so you know a little bit more about her, and then I would love to launch into just what you instantly touched on. So Laurie helps parents and educators who are struggling with how to support the next generation's growth and resilience using compassion, creativity, and collaboration so the children can blossom in these difficult and unprecedented times. Holy moly. Laurie Marshall is a creative activist. She's also a project-based learning and arts integration specialist who's worked with underserved youth for over 40 years. A certified social studies and art teacher, she brings the genius of youth to solve the problems of their communities. Her training includes Outward Bound and Waldorf communication, biomimicry, neurobiology, peace literacy, and restorative justice. Now a grandmother, she raised 2 sons, sending them to public school, homeschooling, and starting a Waldorf-inspired parent cooperative, which is still going 25 years later. Her partners include FEMA, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Bioneers, and Project Drawdown, the world's leading resource for climate solutions. And she has trained over 6,000 teachers in project-based learning. And my son went to a project-based learning school, so I can definitely speak to how important that is, especially for kids, for all kids. So founder of the nonprofit Unity Through Creativity Foundation and the Singing Tree Project, and we'll get links for those for you in a bit. She's facilitated 125 nature-based murals that envision success to community challenges with over 25,000 people in schools, nonprofits, and government agencies around the world. Her short book, Beating the Odds Now, is a support to anyone educating a child. Her motto is, treat every child like a graduate student. Let them pursue their interests deeply, hook them up to an expert community, and let them generate new and impactful knowledge. I love that. Ah, so rich.
Yeah.
So we were talking just before we came on, just, like, hey, how are you? I think that's the question. We asked it always before and expected like, oh, good, fine. But now I think people are really dropping into that question because we're all going through it. We're all being rocked to our cores right now.
Yes.
And so we were speaking to that, just like how each of us was managing this time, and talk about Laurie's work being relevant and so important and also challenging because we can't really be in person right now, or we can't do it in the way that we're used to doing things when it comes to arts.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new paradigm around how do we still use the creative arts process when we can't be right here with each other. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, when we can't touch the same board. And this painting behind me was made virtually, in that people were in India, London, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, California, and we shared our ideas by drawing them and then photographing them and sending them to me. And then I put them together, and then they drew leaves and birds that symbolized what service do you want to give with the leaves, and what is your wish for the birds, because birds fly. And I printed them and cut them out and glued them on. So this is like my first totally virtual collaborative mural.
How beautiful is it,
So
too? I mean,
we can still do it. You know, like you said, we have to be creative and come up with new paradigms.
and who better to do that than the creatives, right?
Right.
The people who already think that way.
Yeah. And we're getting stretched. And when you asked me how I was, I said like, oh, it's so big.
Yeah.
And the thing that I'm holding so much right now is the new life on the earth that's coming, because I have a grandchild that's going to be born within the week.
Aww.
And I'm with my 3-year-old, his big brother, and the world that they're walking into, that they are showing up for. And my work is very deeply entwined with ecosystems and with trees and birds and the 300 life forms that trees support, and all the life forms that birds support. And right now in El Paso, Texas, which is where my oldest son is, and in New Mexico, the reports are that the migrating songbirds are dying, and they've been dying since August 20th, hundreds of thousands of them. And it's not just the fires which have hurt, it's not just the decreased ecosystems which hurt. The scientists don't understand that these beloved birds who are, our ecosystems need so much tending, and our children need so much tending, and we women need to rise and up level more than we ever have, saying that life is important. We grow life in our bodies. We nurture life. The children are important. The elders have important work to do with the children. And because everything is in such a disarray, it is a time to rethink what we're asking of our children. To not have them do inauthentic work, because there's so much authentic work that needs to be done, and they crave to do authentic work. They don't want abstract concepts if they don't see how it can be applied.
Absolutely. And you said something, when I ask people to fill out like the pre-interview form, I always ask, like, what is it that you really want women to know? And you had a lot of beautiful things to say, and some of them are what you just said, like helping women remember that we do not have to do it the masculine way. And you used an image, and I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper into this image. So you gave the image of like not charging for every breastfeeding. That our body is made to give. That it doesn't have to have a monetary value. It doesn't have to, it just is, like it sustains life, literally.
Yes.
So can you go into that? Because I think it really is, it's not like it's new information, but I think right now it's such an important paradigm shift for us to really like shift over to that. Like, so what does that mean? Like, so we've internalized it as, well, this is just our job. Like, this is just what we're supposed to do. And tell me more. There's so many thoughts that go through my head as I think about that.
Thank you for asking, because it's really important, because, the word economy comes from the root meaning home. And in our economy in the United States, we spend all of our time away from home so that we can have a home. And because of COVID, for the first time since the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago, people have been home. The children have been with both of their parents. And yes, that can be tough when the parents are really under a lot of stress and have gotten no support to communicate their needs in a nonviolent way. And on the other hand, the kids are loving it. They are loving, my little 3-year-old grandson goes to Montessori school a few hours each day, and he didn't want to go back to school, even though he always seemed happy. But to have mom and dad in the same house for 6 months is like very profound.
Yeah.
And we've never created a regenerative economy again since farming and the Industrial Revolution. Some farming has been regenerative, but indigenous people knew how to do in regenerative economies by always giving back to the forest, by learning what the forest had to give, what the ecosystem had to give, and to thank every gift that they received. So in our world, we have the gift economy and we have the market economy.
Right.
And the gift economy is where mothering and fathering comes from, and it's also where the arts come from. We receive from Creator images and ideas to express, and the market economy is also part of the measurement mind. And again, if a woman is like, okay, I'm keeping track of every breastfeeding, I'm writing it all down, I'm measuring how much I gave, and you're going to give it back to me, you're going to pay for this sometime. That's the measurement mind.
Right.
And the gift mind is rooted in the fact that child rearing is something that you can never know what you've accomplished until 30 years later. So you make 10,000 decisions every day, and a lot of the time they feel wrong,
right.
But you keep loving and you keep trying, and you can't just, there's no way that you can live in the measurement mind while you're raising kids, or you would go insane.
Right.
The measurement mind has great benefit. There's a book called Dog Song by Gary Paulson, who also wrote Hatchet. And it's the story of a young Eskimo boy who wants to learn the ways of the elders, and he goes on a dog sled journey and meets a young girl who's been cast out of her village because she's pregnant. And he comes upon a polar bear, and he has to calculate how far that spear is going to go to kill the polar bear, to protect this young girl and himself and provide food. And it was not about making relationship. It was about moving an object in space, which is what testosterone does. And we're experiencing the result of great imbalance of the measurement mind, which all the capitalists need to always improve the gifts to the stockholders at the expense of the land and the workers. That's all old. So this time is inspiring when I think about the fact that after the Black Death, the bubonic plague, came the Renaissance. Many things fell apart. And that's what's happening now. So to be poised to make a regenerative economy that focuses on children's gifts as being innate, and so much of the industrialized system is based on fear that you have to control people, fear that you have to control kids, fear that kids aren't going to want to learn, so you have to use this carrot and stick, when in fact kids are built to learn. Our bodies are built to go forward. Every child who takes a step expresses joy. Every child who masters language loves it. And every child comes in just like in an ecosystem with a vital role to play. And so if we feed that curiosity and those innate things, we can partner with them
Yeah.
to solve so many things.
So you are bringing something that I've been speaking to lately that I think is relevant to this difference between, I like the way that you're putting this, like the measurement mind versus the gifting mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because it takes like gender out of it. It takes, some of the stickiness out of it, and just really is like, this is a mindset, right? This is
Yeah.
a way of perceiving the world, or a way of making sense of experience or whatever. So if we think about the measurement mind, children, that puts us in that place of hierarchy, right? That we are the adults, so we are above, the child is below, they need to be quiet and listen, all of that kind of energy, versus the gifting mind, which feels to me more circular. It's like, they may be short and I may be tall in the circle, but we have an equal place, we have equal value, we have something to contribute to the whole. And while I may contribute more or differently, it doesn't mean that the child is now out of the circle in some way, shape, or form, right?
Exactly.
And it's just like, again, this is not new information, but
Every indigenous culture has practiced it.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
And it's so like, I love the way that you said that too. It's like, it's not, it all has value. We're not saying it doesn't have value. We're not saying that the masculine is bad or wrong or in any way, shape, or form. We're saying we're out of balance. We've been way too far on this side, and we need to be straddling the line between the two. We need sometimes the measurement mind to get this particular kind of task done, and we need to be more comfortable in our gifting mind. And the word that you brought up that I feel like it really is the core is fear.
Yeah.
How do we deal with the fear that comes up for parents, for societies, because I'm like you. I've worked with kids the bulk of my career. When I was younger as a therapist, I worked with kids. I worked in schools. I was passionate about teenagers having their voice heard. It was so important to me. And I was like, why is nobody getting this? Why is nobody getting that these people have so much important information to share with us? Like, why are we closed off to their passion and their energy? Because we're judging our own inner, like, wild teenage self or whatever, it always blew my mind. And I always felt like such a unicorn because I believed in children, and I still do. And so I would love for you to speak on that piece about like, that's powerful, like to be in collaboration with children, to be able to help their wisdom, help us all. Like, so.
Yes. So my life has been dedicated to making the vision and voice of children big, loud, and beautiful. And I know that they have important work to do for us all, and we have important work to do for them. And we have a time when our military budget is so huge, and the billions that we need to spend so that children can have in contact school with enough space, with enough adults, with enough people who are like them, so that they feel identified with. We could do that by taking 5% of the military budget. And so we need to lobby and be smart about the politics of this now more than ever. And it's so much fun to collaborate with children.
It is.
When COVID came, I was working on a restorative justice singing tree mural in Oakland, and 5th grade kid drew a picture of the earth. And then, those pictures where there's people holding hands all around the earth?
Right.
Well, she drew COVID holding hands all around the earth.
Wow.
And then she drew a a girl and a boy with a big, ugly COVID virus between them and said COVID got in the way of their relationship.
Oh, this is a 5-year-old?
This is a fifth grader.
A fifth grader. Okay, I was going to say, like, even a fifth grader, they're like, holy moly.
Right. And
I love it.
It's right. And so just the ability to express what's going on is so important because we are in this unknown.
Yeah.
None of us have gone through this together.
Yeah.
And for the parents to be attuning to their fears and saying, hello, fear, I know you are trying to protect me. Thank you for that. I'm going to now give my child strength and faith in life because life will out. New babies are being born. New species are being created by nature. In Costa Rica, there were 500 new forms of orchids created last year, and not all of them will survive.
Yeah.
And nature is so regenerative.
Yeah.
And I'm really heartened by people like Bioneers and the Biomimicry Institute, who are taking deep, hard looks at how nature solves any human problem and seeing how we can model it. And the work that I do as a collaborative artist is always based in trees and forests. And the Singing Tree project that I am working on was inspired by an 8-year-old girl who said, what if the whole world made a painting together in 1999? And part of the benefit of listening deeply to children is that it changes your life.
Exactly.
And she changed my life.
Why do we love those posts where it's like ask a third grader a question and like we start to see these miraculous, like deep you know, life-shattering responses from kids. And I guess my question is, why do we think that's a novelty?
Right.
Like why do we put that on the novelty shelf rather than going, that is the reality? Like that is what we can be getting from these little folks all the time.
So I'm thinking about history. I was a history major as an undergraduate. I love history, and thinking about the 3 million years that we were basically in one tribe and knew about 170 people.
Right.
The earth was not very populated, and everyone in that tribe sang the same songs and did the same dances and wore the same clothes and heard the same stories and gathered around the fire at night to share the day's experience and took care of the children and the elders. And the men hunted side by side in silence. And they protected from other tribes in silence. And because of their protection, the women were able to teach children language. And we have 5 verbal centers and men have 1. I'm answering your great question, which is why do we think that this is an exception, that children are so brilliant and can help us so much? And I think in those tribes, there was a lot of respect for both roles.
Right.
And again, through the Industrial Revolution, we've had this concept that making money and making things and extracting is more important than the root of economy, which is home. Right. That's what that imbalance is. So when you hang out with kids and listen to them and play with them, you know that. Yeah. But the structure of industrialization and colonization, colonization has gone hand in hand with industrialization. You not only demean the indigenous knowledge, but you demean the children and the people who are disabled and the women. And so we are now decolonizing in a very important way. And I have a wonderful book that I'm reading called Sacred Instructions by Sherry Mitchell. And she's of the Penobscot tribe in Maine. And she describes the importance of decolonization, and the importance of getting rid of the conquest mentality, which a lot of social activism has, that conquest mentality that we have to defeat the enemy, as opposed to include people in the beloved community. And Martin Luther King built on that Christian concept, and it may be in other religions as well, of the beloved community, where everyone is heard in the circle.
That's beautiful. And I really appreciate that, because I know that's been hard for me as an activist myself. Is there are times when, you know, I identify heavily with that activist part, and there are ways that I am introduced into activism and I engage in activism that feel really aligned and really balanced and really good. Not comfortable by any stretch of the imagination. It's not supposed to be comfortable, but it feels aligned, right? Versus the ones that I never identified it like that. And I love that have that conquest mentality of like, it's to me, it's like Aikido, the difference between Aikido and karate. You know, in karate, it's force against force, right? There's this meeting of energies, and in Aikido, it's take that energy of that someone is throwing your way and do something with it, right? And that to me is kind of what came to me as you were saying that, is the conquest mentality is more like, we have to meet this with force. Somebody's got to win this battle, versus, there's this energy coming at us. It's not okay. It's not appropriate, you know, and we're going to take that. And that's the question, right? It's like, then what do we do? And my answer is always, we get back into our hearts. That's how, when we feel each other, it's different. If you see me or feel me, it's really hard to make me an other. It's next to impossible to make me an other if you can really feel me. And I believe that's the power of arts, is that's what happens, right? We bypass language, we bypass the BS, we bypass the polarities, and we just get into like, ooh, I felt that touched my heart, that touched my soul in some way, right?
Yes.
And I get the other side too. I get that the sacred anger, the just, you know, we've tried it that way and it's not working. And like, how do we tweak it so that it does? It's just, so much.
Yeah. It's a lot of work forever. Democracy has to constantly be reinvented, and having narratives that say it's possible is really important. And story is so important. I have another book. This is part of a series by Rivera's son called the Ari Ara series, and it's fantastic for young adults. I think 5th grade up, and it's the story of this young girl who's an orphan, and it's as good as Harry Potter, only the magic is nonviolence. And when you talked about the Aikido, she, one of the first, this is 3 books, and the first one's called The Way Between. And Rivera makes this world where there are some people who practice atar, which is attack. There are some people who practice anar, which is withdrawal. And then there are some people who practice azar, which is the way between.
Like assertive versus aggressive and passive.
Yeah, right. And I highly recommend these books for parents, for families, for teachers, because peace literacy is going to be one of the keys to survival in the 21st century. Emotional intelligence is going to be one of the keys to survival in the 21st century. I had the fortune of being at FEMA's Higher Education Symposium, and Admiral Thad Allen, who was the person that came to clean up Hurricane Katrina a month after it had been bungled. he said that the greatest skill we need for the 21st century is emotional intelligence. Um, I've been working on emotional intelligence for many decades, and still I deny the inner voice, and I don't feel my body, and I have good intentions that have negative impacts.
Right.
And so it's not like I got it, it's a done deal.
You are totally okay. So speaking of children, you're making me think of a story. I was a therapist in a school, and often the teachers would identify a child who needed help with, social skills or anger management or whatever it might be. And then I would put them in a group and I would get them all together and we would do drama therapy, because that was my training, my background. And I remember this one teacher, and she was talking about this kid that she wanted to refer to me. And her statement just floored me. And she said, I teach third grade, and if they haven't learned social skills by second grade, I just don't know what to do with them, because I think that, there's something clearly wrong here. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. There's an endpoint to learning social skills and emotional regulation. And no, there isn't an endpoint to that. Are you kidding me? But yeah. I could understand why. I had 5 kids from her class. Mm-hmm. And maybe 1 kid from the other teachers, if any at all.
Yeah.
So it made sense. I was like, interesting that I have so many of her kids in my class, when that makes sense if she can't tolerate the fact that they're still learning, that they're still.
Yeah. Which means, she was not still learning.
No, no, she had a fixed mindset. Yes, totally. And that always floors me, just because I know I'm a lifelong learner. I know I will be learning about myself until my last breath. That's just who I am. Yes, how I want to be in the world. And I want people around me who share that value. And I learned that, unfortunately, in the difficult way, but I'm glad I learned it. I'm glad I learned that is what is necessary for me to feel fulfilled as a human, is to be around other lifelong learners and growers.
Right. Yeah. And our children come in that way.
Right.
They come in with such curiosity.
Absolutely.
My grandson Oliver just asks, what's this, about 1,000 times a day. And my brain is like really, he said, we were looking at the sunset and I said, oh, that's orange. And he said, what's orange? And I said, it's a color. And he said, what's a color? How great was that? And then I shared that question, and somebody said, oh, it's frequency, and sound and light are the same. They're all frequency and energy and vibration. And how can a 3-year-old understand that? Who knows? But what great, that is the kind of thinking that we have to, as women, fiercely hold that space for the kids to ask those questions, because they're scientists and they're artists and they're experimenters, and play is so essential.
I love that. I want you to repeat that, or maybe I'll repeat it and then you can repeat it. We as women need to fiercely hold the space for children to be creative, scientists, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
That is so, that resonates so deeply for me. I think, part of the journey as women rise is really also breaking down our own stereotypes about what is feminine essence, energy, whatever we want to call it. I know that as I grew up, I didn't identify with the feminine. I didn't see myself in it. I didn't know what that actually meant. And I think about, if there had been like a tribe of women and I had elders to go to ask those kinds of questions, or those questions were normalized, right? Around like, why don't I feel like those girls? I don't like painting my nails. I don't like, wearing dresses. I don't like doing those things. Like, what is wrong with me? And they could say, there's nothing, there's all kinds of feminine, Yeah. It took me until I was in my 30s to realize that like the kind of fierce feminine was what I could identify with. Like I could resonate with that energy and allow the feminine back into my body, because I saw myself reflected back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned also in that piece about what you want women to know is like, I thought I had to do it the masculine way because I didn't feel feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I replaced it with like, well, I guess I've got to be that. I've got to be, tough, and I got to just
Yeah.
get it done, and, all of this kind of stuff. And now I feel like I've got, that balance. I mean, yeah, I definitely probably feel more comfortable in my masculine at times, but I've been on a deep dive with the feminine for a good, 10 years or so.
Beautiful.
And that's been so helpful for me to see it reflected back, like, oh, that ferocity that we can have as women to stand our ground and say
Right.
enough
Yeah.
is so vital.
Yeah.
And when women have tried to do that, or at least the women that I've witnessed try to do that, the backlash is so harsh and so severe
Yeah.
that I can see why it's scary for women to think of what might happen if they do that. And I think that's, again, why community and collaboration is so important, because it doesn't need to just be us. It needs to
No,
be a group of us
it does.
standing up saying, enough, this is
Yeah.
enough.
Yes. And it's happening. Because the Voting Rights Amendment was 100 years old, and there were pictures posted of the suffragettes and being beaten and standing up and saying, no, we will vote. And I think about how our bodies get to hold a child. We have this space in our body that allows a child to live, and that keeping that space for the children. And with COVID and what it's asking of us in terms of health, you die. Life is dependent on being very clear about the safety of your children on a new level. And remembering that we are come from Creator, and that we are creative, that creativity is everybody's birthright. Mm-hmm. Using very simple things to help you stay sane and play with your children. I'd like to take paper bags and cut out eyes and make a face that's really sad with tears, and a face that's really mad, and then a face that's really happy, and just put those on and play the game of what are you feeling. And then sometimes when I was really upset with my kids, I would put the angry bag on, and it would immediately shift the energy, because I wasn't just being mad, I was also playing.
Right.
And that the message could be heard better. So
I had a group, and we did emotional volleyball. Like, we would hit the volleyball with the energy of the emotion that somebody identified. And it was just it was so fun. And it was also for like the kids who could identify with a particular emotion, they really got to like act it out, but it wasn't directed at anyone. It wasn't harmful. It was just a way for them to move that energy through their bodies. Yeah. And I loved stuff like that. I had balloons with different faces, and I had a little boy who just was, he was so depressed. This little 4-year-old boy was depressed and didn't want to live anymore. And we would take these balloons and it started off so small. It was like, which balloon do you want to play with today? And he would go over, and then he'd pick it up, and then he'd just kind of like barely touch it, and then we would slowly over time, then he's really playing, with the balloons. But I couldn't have talked about emotions with him. I couldn't, even drawing it was was not activating enough really for him. Like, he needed something physical in order to engage.
I love both the volleyball and the balloon. I'm going to use those. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to this in a long time. Gosh, it's been almost 20 years since I've been able to actually, or 15 years since I've been able to play in that way with my background. In a different place. But
you make me think also of the amount of trauma that we're carrying right now, and that children are experiencing not being safe.
Yes.
And I love the work of Francis Weller, who talks about maturity being holding gratitude in one hand and grief in the other. And that right now we're grieving loss of loved ones.
Yeah.
We're grieving loss of dreams, because that happens to us all. We're grieving the loss of that village that I spoke of.
Yeah.
And we're grieving all the suffering that we're aware of around the planet. I mean, we used to know 170 people, and now we are aware of 8 billion people suffering, no matter our nervous system is fried.
Yeah.
And then we're grieving the suffering of the earth.
Yeah.
So our hearts just have to be so big.
Yeah.
And as you said, we need each other to be of support in this time.
Yeah. And that piece that you shared is so important. I use a lot of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, in my therapy practice. And the dialectic piece is exactly what you're describing. It's like your heart being open and grieving are not mutually exclusive, that you can hold both at the same time. And dialectics is kind of like holding two things that seem to be opposing, but they're both equally true.
Yeah.
You know, I can hate you and love you at the same time, you know.
Yeah.
I can. And
that
so
took me until I was about 35 to get that one.
I know, right? So I think I know for me, it's been a comfort to think of things that way, that it's
Absolutely.
a yes and, right? Just like Aikido is a yes and. I'm going to take that and I'm going to do something with it. I feel like that's life, right? Is we're holding all of these things and they're equally true at the same time. And it's okay that they're equally true at the same time. We have the capacity to hold those things and breathe with them and stay in our hearts. And that piece is like just so much what I'm about right now is just like, can you just bring it back to the body? Can you just bring it back home and breathe with it and let it move on its own? You don't need to force it. You don't need to do anything with it. Just let it move, you know, and then come back. And where are you now? And then if it's overwhelming, come back to the body, you know. It's our mind that throws us into the tantrums and the stories and, you know, all of the rest of the stuff, you know.
Right.
And I think that's also what art does. You know, it bypasses the critical part of our mind because we're engaged in a creative process and we're using our bodies, our whole system to kind of engage in that process, which is what embodiment is. It's just being right here, right now, feeling it all, noticing it all, and staying present. And you're right, with trauma, that's really like, that's the biggest muscle that has to be built, is tolerating those dialectics and just like, it just is.
Right.
It just is.
And we need stories and images that help us.
Yeah.
And the work of heart math is so important, as they measured that that our heart gives off electromagnetic energy to a field of 10 feet around us. And our brain gives off energy 5 inches, because our heart is a much, much older and more, it has more data than our brain does.
Right.
And it's just
why we can sense something before our brain even registers what's happening.
Yeah. And children are embodied.
Yes.
And then we split them up. No, don't do that.
Sit down. Stay still.
Yes.
Don't be in your body.
Don't feel your feelings and tell me your feelings, you know, because they're annoying.
Don't even get me started on that one. Holy, that is the biggest damage that we do as a society to each other, is stopping emotion. Yes, of course, we need to be safe. Yes, we need to learn the tools to manage the emotions that run through our bodies, but all of the messages that we get on a regular basis, oh, stop, no, take a pill for that, no, don't do that, it's, you know, just everything's gonna be fine, rather than, can you imagine if we were allowed to just like, in the middle of the supermarket, something hits us, it's upsetting, and we're allowed to just like sit there and cry and let it move. It takes less than 5 minutes and then I'm good to go, and bam, you know, and I'm not carrying it for weeks.
Yes. Well, I think we should envision an emotionally intelligent world, and Rivera.
Let's do that.
has done that in these books, the Ariara series, and she's done it with women and with great love and complexity and all of the characters, male and female. And we need to just, like the image behind me, just keep saying collaboration is natural, it's powerful. It's, Darwin wrote an article, his last article about species was about how he was wrong, that it's not survival of the fittest. It is this incredible community that's always working together, and the competition happens within that context.
Wow.
And yeah, and our whole agricultural system, which is based on monocrops and not community. There was this, I learned this from the Biomimicry Institute. There was this two different scientists. One said a plant has to grow by itself and can't have any other plants around it. And the other scientist found that plants grew best in community. And it was like the VHS and the war between those two things, right? I forget what the other, beta or whatever. The guy who believed in monocrops won, but there was this really difficult and heated conversation about, do we plant in communities or do we plant in isolation? And now we have just decimated our soil because we're not planting in communities.
Wow.
And we need to be in community. We need to commune and to hold our beautiful warriors with understanding how strong they want to protect. That so often, if they feel attacked, they use that protection to keep other people out.
Right.
And understand that their service of the women and children means that they don't have to protect themselves.
Right.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's so big. So big.
And so being healing warriors is so very important, and fighting colonization, fighting white supremacy, fighting for rich stories to arise from all humans is so important. I have one other book I'd love to share.
Sure.
This is a book that I illustrated that was written by 8-year-old Deontay Webster when he was given a historical fiction assignment. So this is about Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, wow.
And his mom had gone to college in Louisiana, and he was very aware of the story. So he wrote about the flood of kindness. And he thought, what would be the worst thing that could possibly happen if in a hurricane? And he realized for him, it would be to lose his best friend. So in this story, he loses his best friend. And then then the war breaks out, the terrible conflict that happened in New Orleans. And so he intuited all this stuff, right? He's, frickin' 8 years old. And when he cries, and a magic rose appears through his grieving.
Of course it does.
But it disappears. It's not, there's not enough kindness to keep it alive. And then he shares his grief with some elders, and they all cry together, and the rose comes back.
Oh my goodness.
And then New Orleans can rebuild. And
wow.
it is the community that rebuilds. And he never forgets his friend.
Wow.
And so this is a kid writing a story that now will help kids cope with COVID.
Yeah.
Because just as we have to grieve, and we have to grieve together, we can build beautiful community together in a new way. And that's going to be the thing that will help us all thrive.
Yeah.
And if we don't, we're going to wither into these horrible factions of violent terror.
Yeah. Yeah.
So listening to kids is just amazing.
Yes. And you're helping me just create pictures in my own mind of, you know, even if it is virtually, it's just how do we as women continue these kinds of conversations? Like, how do we continue to meet and share our wisdom with each other and bring the children in, like not have them be separate from the conversation, have them, you know, take something from what we've learned here and give it to a child and see what they do with it and bring that information back, you know.
So that's another interesting thing about COVID with people working from home. People don't get that their kids can help them work. They think, I have to push my kid over there and occupy them. But that's just not the whole story. You can also invite the kid, and starting really young, to say, this is what I'm working on. Do you have ideas?
Yeah.
And they will help us. Yeah. And it will help them, because kids need purpose.
Yeah. We all need purpose.
We all need purpose. We all need a striving for mastery. We all need autonomy.
Yeah.
And we all need connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we're wired. We're such mammals that want to cuddle up against each other in the herd, and now we can't do that. Yeah. I drove 1,000 miles in quarantine for 10 days in order to finally be able to hold my grandson. It's like moving through molasses now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we are warrior healers.
We are warrior healers. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing the fierce feminine, for bringing the creative, for reminding us that we don't only hold space in our bodies for children, we can hold space always for children in any environment that we're in. That is part of our superpower, and
it is.
That we have to keep doing the work to recognize the power that we hold, to collaborate with each other to help that power grow and become stronger, to do it in a way that is regenerative and circular. To show that there is another way. And,
and that everyone's included.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the beloved community.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Valerie Carr says that now is the period of transition and birth. When you don't want, you're just like, don't touch me.
Right.
I'm going to do this myself. And birth is very painful.
Yeah.
My daughter-in-law is about to give birth, and she's given birth once. So you know how it is. The first kid, you don't know how hard it's going to be, but the second kid, you do.
Yeah.
And we are giving birth to democracy. We're giving birth to a regenerative economy. It's never happened. We've never had an inclusive society. Native people have been so mistreated. Black people have been so mistreated. Hispanic people who are feeding us have been so mistreated. And it is time to rise. And all of those who were born after the astronauts stepped on the moon and photographed our Earth suspended in space have a consciousness that we're one family.
That's true.
That we never could have before.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I love that. I love that imagery.
It's going to shift.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh my goodness. I feel so blessed to have been a part of this conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for having these conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's stay in touch.
Yes.